Bonnie, how terrific. One of my favorite songs of all time. I know that's not why you sang it this morning, because it's my favorite song, but thank you. That was wonderful, wonderful. One more word of welcome, everybody here this morning. A word of welcome to those of you watching our video online, and no matter where you are when you see this video, and for those of you in the sanctuary right now, I invite us into this moment of prayer. Let us pray. Lord, your holy word is a gift offered to us again this day. We hear it, and now is the time to live it. So we pray. Amen. I had a dream the other night that I was with a group of people and we were on a tour. In fact, we were riding on a bus looking at ornate buildings all around us. Then, as so easily happens in a dream, the bus drove into the water, turned into a fancy yacht, and we went sailing out on a big, beautiful lake. The yacht docked and all the passengers disembarked, and then we went walking around in a zoo. I was walking with a little red fox. Everybody was making over the little fox. It was so well behaved, and it was smiling. A smiling fox, only in a dream. Well, everything was going along perfectly until we arrived at a tall cage filled with birds. All of a sudden, the little fox turned crazy like a fox, climbed the side of the cage, found a hole in the side of the cage, allowing it to enter the cage, and then the fox ate one of the birds. A man from the zoo made me get the fox out of the cage, and we left the zoo. Then I woke up. Now I know there's a tremendous amount we could unpack from that dream. Suffice to say, I found the dream connecting with this morning's passage. Here's what I mean. Try as we might sometimes to distance ourselves from our true nature, that effort is wasted, as our true nature will always break through. A con artist will eventually become known for the cons they commit. Angels among us, as Bonnie and Beverly just so beautifully presented, will eventually become visible because of their kind and protective acts. A fox, even a cute and smiling one, will eventually do the things foxes do, like get hungry and go and eat a bird. Our true nature will always become evident. In this morning's passage, there was a woman who wanted to meet Jesus. This woman was a Syrophoenician, which meant she was a Gentile from the area of Phoenicia, located in the Roman province of Syria, and specifically the town of Tyre. However, she has strikes against her. She was not a Jew, strike one. Also, she was a woman, which meant she had no legal rights, strike two. Added to all of this, she had a daughter who was infected with what Mark calls an unclean spirit, strike three. Regardless of all that, and more importantly, she was a person of faith. She heard about God's power at work in Jesus, and so she asked him to help her daughter. But Jesus answered in a strange and shocking way by saying, "Let the children be fed first, for it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." Friends, at first glance, this is a strange-sounding statement by Jesus, but a closer reading reveals that it is actually a remark by Jesus reflecting the Jewish sentiment of that day toward Gentiles, who were often called dogs by observant Jews, while the term children would imply the people of Israel. Translation, let the people of Israel be served first, not the Gentiles. Now, I've had folks ask me, how could Jesus say such a thing, referring to others as a dog? Could it be, isn't it, some sort of misinterpretation or misprint? My answer is, as much as I wish it were a mistake, it's not. As shocking as this statement sounds to us, it's important to remember that Jesus was a human too. He was culturally in tune with the ways of his day, using the language that was common. So true to human nature, Jesus surely had awkward times. He had those moments when he said something he might have regretted later, situations we can all relate to. In today's passage, we have this account of Jesus saying to the woman, "It's not right to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." As disappointing as that might be to hear and read, the good news is the story doesn't end there. The faithful woman, being true to her nature as a mom and a mom to a child who was in distress, was persistent and wise. She takes that slur that Jesus uses and turns it on him to undercut his point and says, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." What a response. That's a mic drop moment. And Jesus recognized the answer for its true value. He replies, "For saying that you may go, the demon has left your daughter." And the woman returned home and discovered that her daughter was well. Jesus heeded the woman's request, and in that moment, he had an increased understanding of his ministry for all people. A young student came to his rabbi and asked, "Rabbi, how can we tell exactly the moment when night has ended and the day has begun? Is it when it's so light that we can no longer distinguish a star in the morning sky?" "No, my son, this is not how we tell," answered the rabbi. "How then can we tell?" asked the student. The rabbi said, "We know that night has ended and the day has begun when we look into the face of the stranger next to us and we recognize that stranger to be our brother and our sister. Until that moment, we have spent our lives in the darkness. But at that moment, when we see the other for who they truly are, we have awakened into the light of day." Jesus looked into the face of a Syrophoenician woman, and right there, smack dab in our passage, in that space between verses 28 and 29, Jesus had a decision to make. After she replied to him, he could have answered back with an even sharper rebuke, but instead he saw a sister in need, and his answer came from his true nature as a caring, compassionate healer looking out for another, and he shared the healing love of God with this faithful woman and with her daughter. It seems one of the hardest lessons we learn from the gospel is about loving other people, all people. You see, God's nature is clear. It is all around us and it is in us. God's love is universal. I have heard it said that people can easily accept the idea of a God who is vengeful and would strike out against those that others think are deserving of God's wrath. But people have real difficulty accepting the idea of a God who loves everyone equally. Everyone. Think of that person you appreciate the least. Guess what? God loves them just as much as God loves you. The difference is what we do with that God-given love and allowing our nature as part of God's creation to shine as bright as day. Right now, it might not be easy to see the best of human beings in the middle of the Israeli-Hamas war. However, I read a story on NPR that I'm sure you've heard about that speaks to the beauty and the nature of who we all are as God's children. Ariel, age 4, was at a museum in Haifa, Israel last week when he accidentally broke a Bronze Age jar that had been on display at the museum for 35 years. The jar dated back to sometime between 2200 and 1500 BC. It was one of only a few containers of its size from that time period that was in a complete form when it was discovered. It was used in the ancient time probably to hold wine or oil. Ariel's mother said she had looked away just for a second when she heard a crash. When she looked again, hoping not to see any of her 3 children in the vicinity of the crash, she was shocked to find Ariel standing above the broken pieces looking distraught. Immediately, Ariel's father offered to pay for the jar, but reviewing the security footage, the museum was positive it had been an accident. Plus, the jar was insured. The jar was one of many artifacts exhibited out in the open, part of the museum's practice of letting visitors explore history without glass barriers and getting up close and personal with the displays. Ariel, the youngest of the family's 3 children, had always been extremely curious and just simply wanted to see if there was anything inside the jar. And the family was visiting the museum because they live in an area just south of Israel's border with Lebanon that has come under fire from Hezbollah rockets for more than 10 months in a conflict linked to the war in Gaza. The family's been taking day trips around Israel during the summer to escape the tensions of war, according to the father. Well, what could have been a parent's worst nightmare, seeing their child standing over a broken vase with tremendous archaeological value, became a learning experience. Just a few days later, the whole family returned to the museum at the museum's request. The family was greeted by the welcoming and forgiving museum staff members and curators. This second visit went much better, and the museum had the family witness the restoration efforts underway with the jar. Little Ariel even got to help glue a couple of the pieces together. The museum is confident the jar will be fully restored. There's a lot I like about that story. But one of the best parts is the line about the welcoming and forgiving staff members and curators at the museum. They had a decision to make, and they chose to be welcoming and forgiving. That's human nature at its best. And I believe with all my heart that at the core of who we are as humans is a natural intention to care for others. We see the stories from time to time, or even have our own experiences like the museum story where we've been in need and been helped by a stranger, or we've been the stranger helping another. Unfortunately, there are those times when we turn against that natural inclination to help, and in doing so, others end up getting hurt. We don't have to look too far to see ugly and vicious examples of this happening. But do not fear. For the absolute best news today is that even greater than the occasional flaws with our human nature, our truest nature is a spiritual one, connected to the divinity of God, infused with a love always seeking expression. Just like Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman, when our attention is given to the other through genuine exchanges with one another, when we use our ability to listen to and accept what others have to say, and when we honor the respect that all God's children deserve, we are experiencing our truest essence, created by God's love. And the love of God will always prevail. And the love of God changes the world for the better, even if it only happens one or two small pieces at a time. So yes, I believe it to be true that foxes will be foxes and people will be people. But best of all, God will be God, and God's will always be done. And that's no dream. Let us pray. Creator God, thank you for all the ways you bless us, and may we always lean toward kindness, caring, welcome, and forgiveness, just like you always do. This we pray. Amen.